The scent of peonies and betrayal hung heavy in the manicured gardens of the Foster estate. At the center of it all was Madeline, radiant and pregnant, hosting a baby shower that was the envy of the city. But when her husband's mistress, Kendra, crashed the party, flaunting a diamond-studded gift and a secret of her own, the pastel-perfect world was set to explode. Everyone expected tears. They expected a scene. They expected the scorned wife to fall apart. What they didn't expect was that Madeline's smile was a weapon, and she was about to unwrap the only gift that truly mattered, devastating ice-cold revenge. The day of the baby shower dawned with an almost cinematic perfection over the Foster estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. Sunlight, thick and golden as honey, poured over acres of impossibly green lawn, making the dew on the white rose bushes glitter like scattered diamonds. From the grand terrace of the main house, Madeline Foster watched the flurry of activity below. Staff in crisp white uniforms arranged tables draped in pale blue and cream linen. A string quartet was tuning their instruments near a fountain sculpted like a Greek myth. It was a scene of serene opulence, meticulously crafted just like every other aspect of her life for the past 5 years. At 29, Madeline was the epitome of the millionaire's wife. Graceful, impeccably dressed, with a smile that could charm senators, and a quiet poise that suggested old money, even though she came from none. She ran the Foster Foundation's charitable board, hosted flawless dinners, and was now at 7 months pregnant, providing the one thing the Foster legacy required an heir. She placed a hand on the gentle swell of her stomach, a protective, almost automatic gesture. Inside her son kicked a tiny, insistent flutter that was both a comfort and a constant reminder of what was at stake. Her husband, Robert Foster, was a man who looked as though he'd been chiseled from the very concept of success. With a jawline that could cut glass and a charismatic grin that had graced the cover of Forbes, he was the public face of Foster Industries, a global logistics empire started by his grandfather. To the world, they were a power couple. He the dynamic tycoon, she his elegant, supportive partner. "It looks perfect, Maddie," a voice said from the doorway. Brenda Madeline's best friend since their state college days walked onto the terrace holding 2 glasses of sparkling water with lemon. She handed one to Madeline, her expression a mixture of awe and concern. "You've outdone yourself. It's less a baby shower and more a royal coronation." Madeline managed a small smile. "The Foster way. Subtlety is a foreign language to my mother-in-law. How is the grand dame Genevieve Brenda?" asked, leaning against the balustrade. In her element, Madeline replied, her eyes scanning the preparations. "She's currently inspecting the canapes to ensure the salmon-to-blini ratio is up to her standards. I think she's more nervous about this party than I am about giving birth." Brenda laughed, but it died quickly. She studied her friend's face. Beneath the flawless makeup and the serene expression, she saw the faint, telltale signs of exhaustion, a shadow in her eyes that hadn't been there a year ago. And Robert Brenda asked her tone carefully neutral. "Where's the doting father-to-be? I expected him to be hovering, fetching you pillows, and fanning you with a giant palm frond." Madeline's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. He had an early call, a last-minute crisis with the Singapore office. He promised he'd be back long before the first guest arrives. It was a lie, a smooth, practiced lie that slid off her tongue with a bitterness she could taste. There was no crisis in Singapore. Robert had come home late last night, long after she'd pretended to be asleep. The scent clinging to his suit wasn't the stale air of a boardroom. It was the cloying sweetness of a perfume she didn't own. La vie est belle. A scent popular with women a decade younger than her. Brenda wasn't fooled. She had been watching the cracks appear in her friend's perfect facade for months. The late nights at the office that became more frequent, the business trips over weekends, the way Robert's phone was now permanently attached to his hand, angled away from Madeline's view. "Maddie, are you okay?" Brenda asked softly, touching her arm. "Really?" Madeline turned to face her friend, the sunlight catching the fire in the 3-carat diamond on her finger. For a second, the mask slipped. The poised millionaire's wife vanished, replaced by the girl Brenda had known in college, the fiercely intelligent, determined scholarship student who had worked 2 jobs to get her degree in art history. A flicker of raw pain crossed her face, so swift and deep, it made Brenda's heart ache. "I'm pregnant, Bea. I'm hosting a party for 200 of our closest friends and business associates. My husband is a respected philanthropist and businessman." Madeline said, her voice a low, brittle whisper. "Of course I'm okay. Everything is perfect." She was a phenomenal actress. She had learned to perform her role flawlessly. But the performance was taking its toll. For the past 6 months, she had been living in a silent, private hell. It started with a misplaced earring in Robert's car, a classic, almost laughable cliché. Then came the credit card statements she wasn't meant to see charges for hotel suites at the Carlisle Jewelry from Tiffany's dinners for 2 at restaurants he'd never taken her to. She had gathered the evidence methodically, her grief and fury channeled into a cold, quiet investigation. She didn't confront him. She didn't cry or throw things. A part of her, the pragmatic part that had clawed its way out of a working-class background, knew that a hysterical scene would accomplish nothing. Robert was a man who despised messy emotions. He would gaslight her, call her crazy, and become more careful. So she waited. She watched. And she planned. Her hand strayed back to her belly. This baby, her son, had changed the equation completely. This was no longer just about a broken heart and a shattered marriage. It was about security. It was about legacy. It was about protecting her child from the fallout of his father's weakness. "He's lucky to have you, Brenda," said her voice, filled with an unspoken understanding. "He'd better not screw this up." Madeline looked out at the sea of white tents and pastel flowers, the perfect stage for the final act of her marriage. "Oh, Brenda," she said, her voice calm and chillingly clear. "He already has. He just doesn't know it yet." A flurry of movement at the main gate caught her eye. The first guests were arriving their luxury cars, gliding silently up the long, winding driveway. Madeline straightened her shoulders, the mask of the serene hostess snapping back into place. "Showtime," she murmured, turning away from the terrace. She walked back into the cool, marble-floored hallway, a woman walking towards her own execution, or perhaps her own liberation. Today was not just a baby shower. It was a reckoning. And Madeline Foster was ready. The gardens filled quickly, transforming into a vibrant tableau of high society. Women in designer floral dresses and men in crisp linen suits mingled under the vast white tents, their laughter tinkling like the fine crystal from which they sipped champagne, or in Madeline's case, elderflower pressé. The air buzzed with polite gossip and the subtle, relentless hum of networking. Deals were being brokered over mini quiches, and alliances were being forged near the towering 3-tiered cake. Madeline moved through the crowd with an ethereal grace, a queen in her court. She wore a bespoke lavender dress that draped elegantly over her baby bump, her hair swept up in a soft chignon. She accepted congratulations, deflected well-meaning but invasive questions about her due date, and smiled until her cheeks ached. Every touch of her arm, every air kiss, felt like a small static shock. These people weren't her friends. They were her husband's world. They were shareholders, board members, competitors, and their judgmental wives. They saw her as Robert's most beautiful acquisition. Robert had arrived just as the first guests were pulling up his timing as impeccable as his Tom Ford suit. He kissed Madeline on the cheek, his lips cool, his eyes scanning the crowd over her shoulder. "Darling, you look breathtaking," he'd murmured, his voice a low, practiced purr. "Sorry about this morning. The Singapore deal is a beast. As long as the beast is tamed, that's all that matters," she had replied, her voice smooth as silk, giving nothing away. Now he worked the room like the master he was. A hand on this person's back, a shared joke with another. He was in his element, the charismatic center of gravity, around which everyone else orbited. Watching him so confident and oblivious, a cold knot of anger tightened in Madeline's stomach. He was performing, too, playing the part of the proud, expectant father, while living a complete and utter lie. Seated at a wrought iron table in a coveted spot of shade was the true power in the family, Genevieve Foster. Robert's mother was a formidable woman in her late 60s with steel-grey hair, styled in a severe bob, and eyes the color of a winter sky. She wore a tailored Chanel suit that probably cost more than Madeline's entire college education. When Madeline had first married Robert, Genevieve had been polite but distant, viewing her as an outsider, a pretty accessory with no pedigree. But over the years, something had shifted. Genevieve, a shrewd judge of character, had come to appreciate Madeline's intelligence, her quiet strength, and her dedication to the family's philanthropic work. It was Madeline who had restructured the Foster Foundation, increasing its impact and earning national recognition. Genevieve respected competence above all else, and Madeline had proven herself to be far more than just a pretty face. "Madeline." "My dear Genevieve," said her voice crisp as a starched collar. She patted the seat next to her. "Come sit for a moment. You shouldn't be on your feet all day." "Thank you, Genevieve," Madeline said gratefully, sinking into the cushioned chair. Genevieve's sharp eyes swept over the party, missing nothing. A bit ostentatious for my taste, but Robert insisted. He has his father's flair for the dramatic. All flash, not always enough substance. It was the closest she ever came to criticizing her son in public. She then turned her gaze to Madeline, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. "You, however, are all substance. I hope you know that." The unexpected compliment struck a chord deep within Madeline. "That means a great deal to me. The foundation has never been more successful. You have a keen mind, Madeline. Don't ever let my son's enthusiasms make you forget that." The word enthusiasms was loaded, a delicate landmine placed in the conversation. It was a test, a silent acknowledgement that Genevieve saw more than she let on. Madeline met her gaze. In that moment, an unspoken understanding passed between the two women. Genevieve knew her son. She knew his failings, his arrogance, his propensity to be distracted by shiny new things. And she knew that the calm surface of his marriage to Madeline was a deceptive illusion. Before Madeline could respond, a wave of murmurs rippled through a section of the crowd near the garden entrance. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. It was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, like a sudden drop in barometric pressure before a storm. Brenda materialized at Madeline's side, her face tight with fury. "Don't look," she whispered urgently. "Maddie, please just ignore it. I'll have security handle it." But it was too late. Madeline's eyes followed the collective gaze of the guests, and then she saw her. Standing at the edge of the lawn, framed by an archway of climbing roses, was a woman who was the physical antithesis of Madeline. She was all sharp angles and bold colors, where Madeline was soft curves and pastels. She wore a fire-engine red dress, so tight it looked painted on, clinging to a lean, gym-honed body. Her hair was a cascade of platinum blonde extensions, and her lips were painted the same shade of defiant red as her dress. In her hand, she held a large, ostentatiously wrapped gift box from a high-end baby boutique. It was Kendra. The woman from the Instagram photos Madeline had found on a burner account. The woman whose perfume had haunted her husband's clothes. She hadn't just come to the party. She had made an entrance. She stood there for a long moment, letting the shock and gossip wash over the crowd, a smug, triumphant smirk on her face. She was an invading army of one, and she had just breached the fortress walls. Robert, who had been laughing with a banking executive across the lawn, froze. The color drained from his face, his charismatic smile vanishing as if wiped away. His eyes darted from Kendra to Madeline, a flicker of pure, unadulterated panic in them. Genevieve Foster went rigid, her back ramrod straight. Her lips thinned into a single hard line. Who she said, her voice dangerously low, is that Madeline felt 100 pairs of eyes turn to her, waiting for her reaction. They expected hysterics, a collapse, a scene worthy of their insatiable appetite for drama. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her sparkling water, her hand perfectly steady. She placed the glass back on the table with a soft click. She looked from Kendra's defiant stance to her husband's terrified face, and then to her mother-in-law's simmering rage. The stage was set. The main actress had arrived. Madeline met Brenda's worried gaze and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. No security. Not yet. She rose slowly from her chair, her movements fluid and unhurried. She placed a hand on her belly, not for support, but as a source of strength. "It's all right, Genevieve." Madeline said, her voice a terrifyingly calm island in a sea of chaos. She must be a friend of Robert's. I think it's time I went and welcomed her to our home. Every step Madeline took across the lawn felt amplified, each press of her heel into the soft grass, a drumbeat marking the seconds until detonation. The buzzing chatter of the party had died down to a series of strangled whispers. The string quartet, sensing the shift in mood, faltered mid-bar, their music trailing off into an awkward silence. 200 guests were now held captive by the unfolding drama, their eyes darting between the two women on a collision course. Kendra watched Madeline approach, her smirk widening. This was exactly what she wanted, a public stage, an audience, a moment to shatter the perfect facade of the Foster marriage and stake her claim. She saw Madeline not as a person, but as an obstacle, a placeholder she was destined to replace. In her mind, this was a righteous crusade. Robert loved her, not this bland, boring society wife. Robert, meanwhile, was paralyzed. He was trapped between the life he had so carefully constructed and the reckless affair that was about to bring it all crashing down. He started to move towards them, to intercept, to do something. But a sharp, cold glance from his mother, Genevieve, rooted him to the spot. Her eyes said, "You created this mess. You will not make it worse." As Madeline closed the distance she took, in every detail of her rival. The dress was too tight, the makeup too heavy, the jewelry a little too flashy. Kendra was trying to project wealth and power, but it came across as desperate. She was a caricature of a mistress, a cliché brought to life. And beneath the defiant bravado, Madeline could see the flicker of insecurity in her eyes. Kendra needed this public victory because she had no private one. Madeline stopped a few feet from her, close enough to smell the cloying sweetness of La Vie Est Belle. She offered a serene, welcoming smile that seemed to utterly unnerve Kendra. It wasn't the reaction she had prepared for. "Hello, Madeline," said her voice, clear and pleasant, carrying easily in the sudden quiet. "I'm Madeline Foster. I don't believe we've had the pleasure of meeting." Kendra blinked, thrown off balance by the complete lack of hostility. She had rehearsed for a fight, for tears, for screaming. Politeness was a weapon she hadn't anticipated. "Kendra," she said, recovering her voice a little brasher than intended. "Kendra Lowe. And I think you know exactly who I am." "I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage," Madeline replied smoothly, her smile never wavering. It was a masterful stroke, immediately painting Kendra as the aggressor, the unhinged intruder. The whispers among the guests started to shift in Madeline's favor. "Oh, cut the crap," Kendra sneered, her composure cracking. "The polite society wife act is old. I'm here because Robert invited me." This was a bold, foolish lie. Madeline saw Robert flinch out of the corner of her eye. The crowd murmured. "Did he?" Madeline's tone was one of mild curiosity, as if discussing the weather. "How strange. He must have forgotten to mention it to me when we were planning the guest list together. But no matter, you're here now. Welcome." She gestured graciously towards the party. "Can I get you something to drink?" This was psychological warfare, and Kendra was woefully outgunned. She was losing control of the narrative. She needed to escalate. "I didn't come for a drink," Kendra said loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. "I came to give the baby his gift." She thrust the large, gaudily wrapped box forward. It was an aggressive, jarring movement. Several guests gasped. This was a direct challenge, a public declaration of her involvement, not just with Robert, but with the future of the Foster line. Madeline looked at the box, then back at Kendra, her expression unreadable. "That's very thoughtful of you. But really you shouldn't have." "Oh, I had to," Kendra purred, regaining her confidence. She started to unwrap the gift herself, tearing away the paper with a flourish. "I wanted to give our baby something truly special. Something to show him how much he's already loved." The paper came away to reveal a ludicrously extravagant object, a miniature rocking horse not made of wood, but seemingly carved from polished sterling silver. Its eyes were two large sapphires, and its tiny saddle and bridle were encrusted with dozens of small, glittering diamonds. It was tasteless, ostentatious, and wildly inappropriate. It wasn't a gift for a baby. It was a statement of wealth, a piece of branding. "It's a custom piece from a designer in Monaco," Kendra announced, stroking the silver mane. "Robert and I saw his work when we were there last spring." Another calculated blow. A public reference to a trip Robert had claimed was a solo business conference. Madeline could feel the collective intake of breath from the audience. She could feel her husband's world beginning to crumble. Madeline looked at the diamond-studded horse, then back at Kendra's triumphant face. She still didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. Instead, a look of what seemed like genuine pity crossed her features. "It's a lot," Madeline said, her voice soft. "But you've made a mistake. The only mistake was Robert marrying you." Kendra shot back. "No, that's not it." Madeline continued, her calm unwavering. You seem to be under the impression that this gift, your presence here, is some kind of a victory, a checkmate. But you've completely misunderstood the game we're playing. Kendra's smug expression began to falter. This was all wrong. Madeline was supposed to be a puddle of tears on the grass by now. Madeline took a step closer, lowering her voice so that only Kendra and those closest to them could hear clearly. You think you're a player in this. You think you're the queen poised to take the king. She let out a small, almost soundless laugh. My dear, you're not even on the board. You're just a pawn, a very loud, very predictable pawn, and your purpose in this game is now over. Before Kendra could process the insult, Madeline turned to face the hushed crowd. Her serene composure was gone, replaced by something harder, something forged in months of silent pain and meticulous planning. If I could have everyone's attention. Please, she called out, her voice resonating with a newfound authority. It seems we have an unexpected guest and an unexpected announcement. But as it turns out, I have an announcement of my own to share. A gift, you might say. Not just for my son, but for myself. Robert's face was now ashen. He knew with a sudden gut-wrenching certainty that this was not about a mistress or a broken heart. This was about something else entirely. He had underestimated his quiet, graceful wife. He had mistaken her silence for weakness, and he was about to find out just how catastrophically wrong he had been. The garden was so quiet you could hear the gentle splash of the fountain and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Every eye was fixed on Madeline as she stood in the center of the lawn, a pregnant woman in a lavender dress who suddenly commanded the space with the authority of a 5-star general. Kendra stood frozen, the ridiculous silver rocking horse clutched in her hands, her triumphant smirk replaced by a mask of confusion and dawning fear. Robert finally broke from his paralysis, pushing past 2 of his shocked business partners. Madeline, darling, he began, his voice strained, attempting a placating tone. Let's not do this here. This is a private matter. Let's go inside. Madeline turned her head slowly to look at him, and for the first time that day, she let him see the abyss of contempt in her eyes. The look was so cold, so utterly devoid of the love and warmth he had taken for granted, that he physically recoiled. A private matter. She repeated, her voice dangerously soft. You made it a public matter when you financed your mistress's lifestyle with our money. You made it a public matter when you lied to me, to your mother, to everyone in this garden. And she, Madeline gestured dismissively towards Kendra, made it a public matter when she decided to crash our son's baby shower. So no, Robert, we are absolutely going to do this here. Now. She turned her back on him, a final, brutal dismissal. She addressed the crowd again, her voice ringing with clarity. Many of you have offered your congratulations today, and I thank you. But I'm afraid some of you are congratulating the wrong woman. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Kendra's eyes widened. This was her moment. She thought Madeline was about to concede. That's right, Kendra interjected, finding her voice. Tell them, Madeline. Tell them all who Robert really loves. Tell them I'm the one who can make him happy. Madeline ignored her completely, as if she were a buzzing fly. You see, Ms. Lowe here came to make her own announcement, and I wouldn't want to steal her thunder. Please, Kendra, go on. Tell everyone your big news. Baited and validated. Kendra puffed up with pride. She looked directly at Genevieve Foster, a look of pure triumph on her face. "I'm pregnant," she declared, her voice ringing across the lawn. "I'm 12 weeks pregnant. With Robert's baby." If the previous revelation had been a shockwave, this was a nuclear bomb. The garden erupted in a cacophony of gasps and frantic whispers. This was no longer just an affair. It was a succession crisis. 2 women carrying the children of the Foster heir. Robert looked like he was going to be sick. He opened and closed his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked desperately at his mother, who stared back with an expression of pure, unadulterated ice. Kendra, high on her dramatic climax, turned to Madeline, expecting to see a finally broken woman. "So you see," she said, her voice dripping with condescending pity. "It's over. He's mine now. The future is mine. My child will be a Foster." And then Madeline did the last thing anyone expected her to do. She laughed. It wasn't a hysterical laugh, but a low, rich, genuine sound of amusement. It was the most terrifying sound Robert had ever heard. "Oh, you poor, foolish girl," Madeline said, shaking her head as if explaining a simple concept to a child. "Did you really think it was that simple? Did you think this was all about a man, about who he loves?" She took a step toward Kendra, her gaze sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. "You did your research, I'm sure. You know Robert is the CEO of Foster Industries. You know this estate is worth a fortune. You saw the private jets, the yachts, the limitless black card. You saw a winning ticket, and you cashed it in, getting pregnant to secure your prize. It's not like that." Kendra stammered, the narrative violently wrested from her grasp. "Robert and I are in love." Love Madeline's voice was laced with irony. "Let me tell you what you're in. You're in a relationship with a man who lied to his pregnant wife for over a year. A man who let you believe he would leave his entire life for you. A man who right now is looking at you not with love, but with the pure terror of a man who just lost everything. Do you honestly think a man with that little character has any capacity for real love?" She didn't wait for an answer. She turned to Robert. "For 6 months, Robert, I have watched you. I have documented everything. The trips you took with her using company funds, which, by the way, is embezzlement. The apartment you leased for her in the city under a shell corporation. The $500,000 line of credit you opened for her at Cartier. I know everything." Each word was a nail in his coffin. The business associates in the crowd, men who lived and died by reputation and fiscal responsibility, were staring at Robert with new, calculating eyes. He was no longer a charismatic leader. He was a liability, a fool. And while you were busy playing house with your little project— Madeline continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, a confidential tone that drew everyone in. "I was busy too. I was meeting with lawyers. I was meeting with forensic accountants. And most importantly," she paused, turning to lock eyes with her mother-in-law, "I was meeting with Genevieve." Genevieve Foster stood up, her posture regal and severe. She gave a single sharp nod, confirming her allegiance. The final piece of Robert's world fell away. He wasn't just losing his wife. He had lost his mother, the true iron hand within the Foster empire. Kendra looked back and forth between the 2 women, a frantic, desperate energy radiating from her. "What are you talking about? What does she have to do with anything?" "Robert runs the company." Madeline smiled, a thin, predatory smile, that she said is the most expensive mistake you will ever make, believing that little fantasy. And with that, She finally revealed her gift. You see, Kendra, you, like so many people, have a fundamental misunderstanding of how the foster family actually works. Madeline began, her voice taking on the quality of a lecturer revealing a profound secret. She started to walk slowly along the edge of the crowd, commanding the full attention of every guest. Robert remained frozen in place, a statue of a man watching his own legacy be dismantled. You see, my husband, she said, gesturing towards Robert without looking at him as the king. The source of all the power and all the wealth. It's an easy mistake to make. He certainly does his best to project that image. The CEO title the magazine covers the bold decision-making. But it's all a performance. A role he was given, not one he earned. She stopped and turned to face the crowd, her gaze sweeping over the powerful men and women who did business with her husband. The founder of this empire was not Robert's father, but his grandfather, William Foster. William was a brilliant but cautious man. He had seen other family dynasties crumble in a single generation due to the recklessness of an unworthy heir. He was determined that his legacy would be protected from foolishness, greed, and moral weakness. Genevieve Foster's face was a mask of stern approval. She knew this speech. She had likely helped craft it. So when William set up the family trust, the entity that holds the controlling shares of Foster Industries, this house, and nearly all the liquid assets, he didn't just hand the keys to his son, and in turn his grandson. He put in safeguards, covenants, specifically a comprehensive morality clause. A low murmur rippled through the guests. Morality clauses were old-fashioned, often unenforceable relics, but in a trust document written by a man like William Foster, it would be ironclad. The clause is very specific. Madeline continued, her voice as sharp and clear as a diamond. It states that the primary beneficiary and acting head of the company must exhibit, and I quote, unimpeachable moral character, fidelity to their spouse, and sound personal judgment. It explicitly states that any act of public scandal, adultery, or financial malfeasance that brings shame upon the Foster name is grounds for immediate and permanent removal from their position as beneficiary. She let the words hang in the air for a moment, letting the full weight of their meaning settle upon her audience. For 5 years I have been a loyal wife. I have upheld my end of the bargain. I have run this household, managed the family's philanthropic endeavors, and protected the Foster name. I am carrying the next legal heir to this family. My husband. She finally turned to look at Robert, her eyes devoid of any emotion, but a cold final judgment has failed on every conceivable count. Robert finally found his voice, a desperate, strangled sound. This is ridiculous, Madeline. You can't. An old family document. It means nothing. Oh, it means everything. A new voice cut in. It was deep, calm, and carried an unshakable weight of legal authority. A man in a conservative grey suit, whom no one had noticed standing quietly near the terrace, stepped forward. It was Mr. Henderson, the senior partner at the law firm that had represented the Foster family for over 80 years. He held a leather-bound portfolio in his hands. Mr. Henderson, Madeline said with a nod. Thank you for coming. Mrs. Foster, he replied respectfully. He then turned his gaze to Robert, and it was utterly unforgiving. Robert, pursuant to Article 7, Section 4 of the William C. Foster family. Trust. Your mother, Genevieve Foster, as the trustee, and your wife, Madeline Foster, as the aggrieved party, have invoked the morality clause. I have the papers right here. He opened the portfolio. As of 9:00 a.m. this morning, the board was notified. You have been removed as CEO and Chairman of Foster Industries, effective immediately. Your access to all company accounts, credit lines, and properties has been suspended. Your shares, which were held in trust for you, have been forfeited. Kendra made a small, choking sound. Her entire body began to tremble. The silver rocking horse slipped from her grasp and fell to the grass with a dull, heavy thud. Forfeited. What does that mean? Robert stammered, his face a mess of disbelief and terror. It means they are no longer yours, Mr. Henderson stated plainly. According to the Trust's succession directives, in the event of a forfeiture of this nature, the controlling interest passes to the next eligible heir. That heir is the legitimate firstborn child. Your son. Madeline placed a hand on her belly. The true gift. It wasn't revenge. It was security. It was power. Until my son comes of age. Madeline announced, her voice ringing with finality. I, as his mother and legal guardian, will be the sole executor of his trust. His shares, his inheritance, will be managed by me, and by Genevieve as the primary trustee. The entire garden was silent, processing the sheer, brutal brilliance of the move. Madeline hadn't just divorced her husband. She hadn't just exposed him. She had, with the full backing of the family's matriarch and its legal fortress, stripped him of everything. His job, his fortune, his name. She had surgically removed him from his own life. So you see, Kendra, Madeline said, her voice now softer, almost pitying. You came here today to claim a prize. But the prize doesn't exist anymore. The man you thought was a millionaire is, as of this morning, a man with a mountain of personal debt and no income. The name you wanted for your child is now his alone to carry, with none of the benefits. You didn't win a king. You tied yourself to a pauper. Kendra stared at Robert, her face a mask of horror and betrayal. She finally saw him for what he was, not a powerful tycoon, but a hollow fraud. The love she had professed so loudly was evaporating before everyone's eyes, replaced by the cold, hard calculus of a bad investment. Madeline looked at the stunned faces of her guests, at her broken husband and his ruined male mistress. She had laid waste to the battlefield. There was nothing left to say. Now, if you'll excuse me, she said, her composure absolute. This has been a rather tiring day. I believe I'll be leaving. Brenda. Mr. Henderson, if you'll join me. She turned without a single backward glance and began to walk toward the house, a woman who had just inherited an empire. Madeline's exit was a study in quiet power. She didn't run. She didn't gloat. She simply walked away, leaving a crater of social and financial ruin in her wake. Brenda flanked her on one side, a fiercely protective shield, while Mr. Henderson walked on the other, the leather portfolio of doom tucked under his arm. The guests parted for them, like the Red Sea, their faces a mixture of shock, awe, and a healthy dose of fear. They had just witnessed a masterclass in vengeance, and they knew they were in the presence of a new, formidable power. The moment Madeline disappeared into the house, the spell of silence shattered. The garden erupted into a maelstrom of frantic whispers, panicked phone calls, and the hurried exodus of guests who wanted no part of the ensuing fallout. The string quartet began packing their instruments with comical haste. The catering staff started clearing away the untouched canapes and the three-tiered cake, a monument to a future that would never happen. Left in the center of the chaos were the two architects of the disaster, Robert and Kendra. Robert finally broke. The arrogant CEO vanished, replaced by a desperate, pleading boy. He stumbled toward his mother, his face pale and slick with sweat. "Mother, you can't do this," he begged, his voice cracking. "This is my birthright. Everything. It's all I have. Please, Genevieve." Foster looked at her son, and for the first time in his life, he saw no love, no sympathy. Not even anger in her eyes. All he saw was a cold, hard finality like a steel door slamming shut. "Your birthright was conditional, Robert," she said, her voice cutting through his pleas. "It was conditioned on your character, your integrity. You have proven you have neither. You not only betrayed your wife, a woman of far greater substance than you will ever possess, but you endangered this entire company with your recklessness. You brought this creature," she flicked her eyes disdainfully toward Kendra, "to our home. You humiliated the mother of your only legitimate heir. You are not a Foster. You are a disgrace." Each word was a physical blow. Robert staggered back, speechless. "You will vacate this house by tomorrow evening." Genevieve continued, her tone that of a CEO, issuing directives. "Your personal effects will be packed and sent to a storage facility. You will be given a severance, as stipulated by the trust for a disgraced beneficiary, enough to live on, but not enough to continue this pathetic lifestyle. You are no longer welcome here. You are no longer a part of this family's business." She then turned her glacial gaze upon Kendra, who was standing amidst the fleeing guests, looking utterly lost. She was no longer a glamorous homewrecker. She was just a girl in a tight red dress who had made a catastrophic miscalculation. "As for you, Miss Lowe," Genevieve said, her voice dripping with venom, "I suggest you find a very good lawyer. Though I doubt any lawyer will be able to extract a single dime from my son, seeing as he no longer has any. If you are, in fact, pregnant with his child, you may file for child support. I imagine, based on his new income, you can expect a check for a few $100s a month. Perhaps that will cover the cost of a single diamond on that hideous rocking horse." Kendra's face crumpled. The fantasy she had built for months, a life of luxury, status, and victory, had been publicly and brutally incinerated. She looked at Robert, the man she thought was her ticket to everything, and saw only a weak, broken shell. There was no love in her eyes, only pure, undiluted rage. "You lied to me," she shrieked at him, her voice raw with hysteria. "You told me you were in control. You told me you'd leave her for me. You ruined my life. You ruined my life." Robert shot back, his terror finally boiling over into fury. He pointed a trembling finger at her. "None of this would have happened if you hadn't shown up here. You did this." Their ugly public fight was the final pathetic act of the drama. They were two rats trapped in a cage of their own making, now turning on each other. The remaining guests scurried away, wanting no part of the squalor. Genevieve watched them for another moment, her expression one of profound disgust. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back to the house, leaving her son to his fate. He was no longer her concern. Upstairs in the master suite she had once shared with Robert Madeline was directing two of the household staff. "Pack everything of Mr. Foster's," she instructed calmly. "Use the guest wing luggage. I want it all gone by noon tomorrow." Brenda watched her, amazed at her friend's composure. The woman who had been living a lie for 6 months was gone. In her place was a decisive, clear-eyed leader. "Maddie, are you okay?" Brenda asked, finally alone with her. Madeline paused, looking out the window at the scene below. She could see Robert and Kendra still arguing on the lawn, their gestures wild and desperate. She watched them for a moment, not with hatred or satisfaction, but with a strange sense of detachment, as if observing a science experiment. "I'm better than OKB," she said, turning away from the window. She placed a hand on her belly. "For the first time in a very long time, I feel free. And more importantly, I feel safe. My son is safe." That had been the core of it all. Not just revenge for a broken heart, but a fierce maternal instinct to protect her child. She knew Robert's recklessness would eventually have squandered the Foster fortune. His weakness would have created an unstable, toxic environment for her son. She hadn't just removed a cheating husband. She had removed a threat. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat from the doorway. "Madeleine Genevieve has requested a meeting with us in the library to discuss the transition. The board is ready for your direction." Madeleine nodded. "Of course. I'll be right there." As she walked out of the bedroom, leaving the last vestiges of her old life to be packed away in boxes, she felt a profound sense of peace. She had walked into that party as a victim, a woman about to be publicly humiliated. She was walking out as the head of a dynasty. She had not only survived the storm, she had become the storm. And her true life, the one she would build for herself and her son, was just beginning. A month later, the Foster estate felt like a different world. The oppressive tension that had lingered beneath the surface for so long was gone, replaced by a quiet, focused calm. The house, which had often felt like a gilded cage to Madeleine, now felt like a fortress, her fortress. Robert's presence had been so thoroughly erased, it was as if he were a ghost who had never existed. His portraits were gone. His study was now a nursery in progress, and his extensive wine collection had been donated to a charity auction. Madeleine and Genevieve had formed an unexpected and formidable alliance. The two women, once separated by age and background, were now bound by a shared purpose to protect and grow the Foster legacy for the next generation. They spent their days in the grand wood-paneled library, poring over financial reports and strategy documents with Mr. Henderson and the new interim CEO, a steady hand picked by Genevieve. Madeleine bloomed in this new role. The sharp intellect she had once applied to art history was now directed at corporate governance and philanthropic strategy. The board members who had initially been skeptical were quickly won over by her incisive questions, her clear vision, and her unflappable demeanor. She wasn't Robert's replacement. She was his superior in every way that mattered. She possessed the quiet strength and strategic mind of William Foster himself, a fact that did not escape Genevieve. "You have your grandfather-in-law's eyes, you know," Genevieve remarked one afternoon, looking at Madeleine over the rim of her reading glasses. "Not the color, the perception. You see the whole board, not just the next move." "I had a good teacher," Madeleine replied with a small smile, nodding towards Genevieve. A genuine affection and deep respect had grown between them. They were no longer mother and daughter-in-law, but partners. News of the outside world trickled in. Robert, stripped of his name and fortune, had become a pariah. He had tried to leverage his old contacts, but the story of the baby shower had spread through their social and business circles like wildfire. No one wanted to be associated with a man who had not only been so publicly exposed as a cheat and an embezzler, but had also been so thoroughly outmaneuvered by his wife. He was last seen trying to launch a small, ill-fated consulting firm out of a rented office space in Stamford. Kendra had disappeared from the public eye even more completely. After a few desperate attempts to sell her story to the tabloids, a story no reputable outlet would touch for fear of the Foster lawyers, she had faded into obscurity. A private investigator hired by Madeline to handle the legal loose ends reported that Kendra had moved back to her hometown in Ohio. The pregnancy, it turned out, had been a lie, a final desperate gamble to force Robert's hand. The revelation was almost pitiful, stripping away the last of her power and reducing her to a sad, cautionary tale. Madeline felt a brief flicker of pity for her, then dismissed it. Kendra had chosen her path. One crisp autumn evening, Madeline was in the nearly finished nursery. The room was painted a soft, calming grey, with a mural of a gentle forest scene on one wall. The ostentatious silver rocking horse was gone, of course. In its place was a simple, beautifully crafted wooden one that had been William Foster's as a child, a piece Genevieve had brought down from the attic. Brenda came in carrying a box of baby clothes. The final touches, she said, smiling. "How's the new Queen of the Universe doing?" Madeline laughed, a real unburdened laugh. Hardly a queen, just a very busy, very pregnant CEO in training. "I've never seen you look happier," Maddie Brenda said, her voice soft with emotion. "Even with all this craziness, you look like you can finally breathe." "I can," Madeline admitted, running a hand over the smooth wood of the old rocking horse. "For years I was trying to be someone I wasn't, the perfect wife, the perfect hostess. I was holding my breath, trying not to make a mistake, trying to earn my place here. It was exhausting." She turned to face her friend, her eyes shining with a clear, calm light. "The irony is I finally found my place here, not by being perfect, but by embracing the mess, by fighting back. This house, this company. It's not Robert's legacy that I'm protecting. I'm building one for my son, a legacy of strength, integrity, and the knowledge that his mother would burn the world down to protect him." Her baby kicked a strong and steady rhythm against her hand. It was no longer a flutter of anxiety, but a promise of the future. She had faced the ultimate betrayal and had not only survived but thrived. She had taken the pain and forged it into power. The baby shower had been meant to be her public humiliation, the end of her story. Instead, it had been her coronation. She was Madeline Foster, not by marriage, but by merit. And her reign was just beginning. And so the story of the baby shower became a legend in certain circles, a chilling reminder of what happens when a quiet woman is pushed too far. Madeline proved that the greatest gifts aren't wrapped in shiny paper or studded with diamonds. They are gifts of strength, intelligence, and the courage to reclaim your own life. She transformed a moment of profound betrayal into a declaration of independence, securing not just a fortune, but a future for her child, built on a foundation of integrity. Her story is a powerful testament to the fact that the most underestimated person in the room is often the most dangerous. What did you think of Madeline's ultimate revenge? Was it a calculated masterpiece or a step too far? We all face moments of betrayal, big and small. How we respond defines who we are. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of strength and survival, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable real-life drama.